Yeah, so sort of echoing Sam's point, we realized at some point during this cancellation of the performance RFP that we were trying to fly before we could even walk, and we really needed to take a step back and understand, what is it that we even have to like measure, and how can we get it, and what is it? The screenshot on the right, is a true picture that I got when I started, and I asked, what databases do we have and what systems do we have? And I got this, and I don't actually know what the blue things mean. I never found out. Some of these aren't real, they never were, as I found out later. So this was really all I had to go on. It was a lot of fun, and we really wanted to take all of these databases and put them into one place, and really just like have ease of access. Some horror stories where, when you get started at the city, you would have maybe a couple days before you got, a working access to things. And then maybe another couple weeks before you got your first access to a correct data set, you would ask these questions, you would get sent around a chain of people, like, oh, hey, you gotta talk to that guy, and that guy, oh, in that department, and then that guy. And then in the end, you find out there's actually no data, they just thought there was. So, it was really very, I would say, painful for a lot of our analysts who really wanted to do good work and just really provide some analysis and insight into our life. And we couldn't really provide them any sort of data or inventory that made sense. So we set out to acquire a warehouse and a platform that allowed us to also automate things. This was huge. This was the criteria. There were a few things going into the criteria that for the data warehouse that we wanted. One was that it really couldn't just be a data warehouse. It also had to be a place that we could, use to run pipelines to load things into the data warehouse. Some solutions we got as a response were very separated, and actually one of them didn't talk to each other. They were like, well, you have this platform that you can run pipelines on, but then you can't actually talk to the data warehouse. And we're like, okay, that doesn't make sense. A lot of other criteria is where we have a variety of stakeholders in the city. Some are very non-technical. They don't want to be, they shouldn't be. They just want to look at a report or like a graph, or maybe, just even a picture or something. And some people really just want to get in there, roll up their sleeves, and develop a crazy amount of code that will produce amazing insight. And we just, we couldn't support everybody with any single platform we had. And we had all these ad hoc things running in different languages and different scripting methodologies, and it was just like a lot of different stuff. So we really okay, we need a thing that helps, that is intuitive and easy to use for people who are not very technical. We need a thing that also helps analysts who are somewhat technical but maybe don't want to dive deeply into some coding practices. Just run SQL. We want to help our analysts run notebooks. We started growing our data science wing, and we really want to have some sort of data science tools. One of the responses was like, well, you drag this box and it just does data science for you. Cool. That was a real response. It was really scary. We decided that the choice had to serve all the needs, and that was the big thing. So we had a lot of people in this process who were advising on what really worked for them. And we did come with a solution that I think really fits our needs, which ended up being Civis. But another big thing going into the choice was we really wanted to focus on open tools that weren't proprietary and really we could hire for, which meant we were looking for something like Python or R to be backing the code. One of the reasons is a lot of, it's really hard to hire good talent, especially in the tech world, especially in the government. You can't really afford the good stuff. So, you had to be a skill that people have, not just oh, you have to start and know this really obscure system in their code and their stuff. You have to we wanted something really easy to share. And we also wanted something we could upload to GitHub and maybe eventually share with the world. And that was a big consideration. So Civis ended up being kind of matching basically every checkbox that we wanted. In the end, it was great. And then we, sharing sort of Vision Zero, our little success story / the background for a cool thing that ended up happening as part of the implementation, which is, so Vision Zero was, it's a commitment, many cities follow it, that to decrease the number of deaths to zero from any fatal or any serious injuries from car accidents. So, pedestrians getting hit by cars and stuff. Really great program. We're very committed to it as a city. And prior to that, we really wanted to just know how many people do get hurt right now, and what does that look like? So we started digging around. It was a lot of calls to people who were like, hey, can you send me this data? Oh no, sorry, HIPAA. Oh no, sorry, we don't have that. We eventually talked a lot of agencies into buying in to sharing a common standard. It was a huge effort. And then we were running into all these really weird problems. So, for example, our system for Vision Zero, when you get into a car accident and somebody sees you, and they say, hey, I see an accident in front of 123 Main Street. Cool. Car responds, ambulance comes to the scene, And how we get the data is that it looks like the car drove into 123 Main Street because that's the address locator. So, and prior to this, we just published that as is. So we're like, okay, like whatever, they're dots, they're close enough, you can kind of tell the area. And then people would complain. They're like, nobody drove into my house, please don't show that. So we're like, okay, that's fair. So we started looking for solutions how to like make the data look actually correct. And this was what came in. We have some very brilliant people working in our team. This is by no means my accomplishment, but we certainly we collaborated very heavily, and we found that something called PostJanus. We ran a Postgres backend database, a PostJanus add-on, which is a spatial component to Postgres, an open source software that allows you to run SQL queries that allow you to do spatial computations. Simply, it's a query. Like if you know SQL, yeah, you have to know some extra SQL, but it's just SQL in the end of the day. And we were able to, internally, to basically call something snap these points from 123 Main Street, the house, to the road in front of the house. And it was literally 2 lines of SQL code, and it was just mind-blowingly incredible. So we were so happy. We pat ourselves on the back. We published the new data. People complained again that, well, actually, if it's a long and skinny house, and the point was like in the middle of it, it would snap to the closest street correctly, which was the side street. But since we have a pretty open, a strong commitment to open data, we published everything, street names included. So people were saying that the accident happened, on the side street. It looks like it happened on the side street, but it actually happened on Main Street. But because of the way that the map worked, it would snap to the closest side street. Cool. So we end up digging in there, and what ended up happening is something we called the query, which was a very short, I want to say 15 lines of SQL code that did all of this. It found the dot, it snapped it to the street, and then it also did a match on the street name and the addressing system to the match of where the crash was by street name. A simple where clause in SQL, but the fact that we can do this in 15, 20 lines of code was incredible. And we sort of realized the sheer power of this. And before that, this process, which didn't snap anything to anything, still took 2 weeks and involved 3 archaic systems, massive enterprise systems that constantly failed. And this poor guy would spend 2 weeks just running this code that was constantly failing, and eventually he'd get a success. So the query was kind of revolutionary because it literally 15 lines of SQL code, and we can do this. So we ended up, when we were in the negotiations for the contract with Civis, the backend was not Postgres, and we very nicely asked, and Civis very nicely agreed, to implement the first ever Postgres backend for us with PostJanus. So we run that now as a backend, and it is incredible. Honestly, Vision Zero is one of the first things that we loaded into it. We have many other things in the pipeline that are coming. A great example that is something so simple to do now, for example, we have restricted income properties that often get 301 cases that they have to take care of themselves. Our 301 system also works on the addressing system. So if you report a sidewalk problem, it might not get mapped to the house, and the owners of this house will never know that it's their problem until it comes back through layers of systems and bureaucracy and eventually funnels their way. But by that time, the constituent already hates everything. So, nobody really was too happy. So they asked us if they can give us, we can provide them every 301 case within 30 feet of the following addresses, and they just gave us a list of addresses. And before, this would be pretty hard, pretty manual. There'd probably be an analyst who'd spend maybe an hour of their time a week or something, running these numbers and sending it to someone. And with PostJanus, we're like, yeah, we can. It's a query. It's a buffer. It's a 30-foot buffer. We put that in, and we just put out a report. And this person never knows that it went from super difficult to super easy. He just gets a report with a table of cases, and that's it. So the leverage of the power, and we've been expanding the use of this technology in basically every aspect, and honestly, it's been revolutionary.